celebrate the glorious day that God's gave us.
Amen.
I asked Pastor John last Sunday if he could afford to give me a little bit of time up here that I had to give my testimony. He graciously accommodated me. First, for everybody that don't know my name, he's already told them this morning, I'm Jimmy Barnhill. This lovely lady sitting right here is a godsend. That's my wife, Krista. I took this to the Lord and asked him to give me strength to give my testimony this morning. And he laid it on my heart and told me, he said, don't try to make it sound good. Just tell him your story. I'll show my glory in that. So if you would, just bear with me, because I'm going to have to start at the beginning. Because where I stand here right now has been a life journey. 1956, I was born the youngest of 10 children in a small town about 99 miles west of Atlanta on I-20, Oxford, Alabama. If you don't mind, I'm going to walk around.
I do that. That's okay.
It does happen. Small town, Oxford, Alabama. Folks, I'm here to tell you, I was not born to a religious family. As a matter of fact, profanity was part of our everyday language. It's just the way it was in our household. I can only remember a couple of times of ever being in the house of the Lord with my parents. The first time was when we laid my oldest brother to rest. But by the grace of God, and God rest her soul, my maternal grandmother laid the foundation to all of us children. My mom and dad basically gave us the basics of religion. Sure, we knew what Christmas was about, we knew what Easter was about, but as far as living the Word, no, we didn't. My teenage years was in a very troubling time in this country, the end of the 60s and the early 70s. 14, me and a couple of guys that I was hanging around with, back before they took God out of schools, they had a revival at our high school stadium. So we went. We walked over there to it. None of us three had religion in our lives. We all came from the same background. I guess basically my family, but we didn't realize it, my family was probably known today would be the working poor. I think I was in the second or third grade before we ever got an inside bathroom. And then my dad built it on the back porch. But hey, that was great. We didn't care where it was. We had an inside bathroom. But anyway, we went to this revival. And I forget, there was probably a couple of hundred, maybe 300 people there. And we went down at the calling. But I got to be honest with you, I don't even think we understood what we was doing. I think we just got caught up in the moment because it didn't last. Like I said, I grew up in teenage years, late 60s, early 70s. If anybody around in here knows what was going on during those times, very turbulent times in this country. I got caught up in the counterculture. Started doing drugs. And folks, it ruled my life. It caused me a lot of trouble. I got in trouble with the law. Consequently, it caused me a lot of trouble in high school. At the end of my 10th grade year, 16, I know it all. Can't nobody tell me nothing. I quit school. Left home. I had 3 sisters living up here, so I came up here. 16, I got a job. Got me an apartment. I think I'm doing good. Folks, the drugs I was doing in Oxford, Alabama was nothing compared to what I found up here. Got in with the wrong crowd, doing even more serious drugs. Out one night, and I can't call them friends because friends will not allow you to do that. They were trying to steer you from it. Out one night, doing our usual thing, partying. Had a bad experience that night. When I got to the point that I could drive, instead of going back to my apartment, my sister and her family was renting a house right down from us. I went to her house. Babe, you got some more water? Went to her house, knocked on her door. 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Woke her up. Asked her, could I stay with her? Could I come in there and sleep in her house? She said, yeah, come on in. No, I'm fine. Went in. I went to her guest room, laid down, could not go to sleep. Folks, I literally thought I was dying. I got up, got on my knees and prayed. And I asked the Lord, just let me see the next day. I just want to see the sunrise. I heard it just as clear as I hear my voice now. Get next to my child, no harm will come to her. The only child I could think of was my sister's daughter. She was an infant. She had her sleeping in her bed with her. Her husband had fallen asleep on the couch. So I went into her room and I shook my sister. She woke up. She said, what do you want? I said, can I get into the bed with you and Kelly? And she said, what? I said, Sheila, can I just get into the bed with you and the baby? And she said, yeah, just get in the bed, don't wake the baby up. Okay. I laid down and I snuggled up next to the baby, and as soon as my arm touched her, I was asleep.
Wow.
You think that woke me up? No. I'm still running around blind. But years later, that infant, I think she was 4 years old, when they found out she had a bad medical condition. She was born with 4 kidneys. And all 4 of them stopped functioning. So she, to this day, I don't know how many major surgeries that girl's been through. But there is no doubt that if there is a child of God on the face of this planet, it's her. At 6 years old, I can remember 4 or 5 years old, she was walking around with bags attached to each leg with tubes coming out of her back. She would go into surgery at Chapel Hill, and she would tell my sister and my mother, don't worry about me, Jesus has already talked to me, he's going in with me. That girl never shed a tear. To this day, it don't matter how much pain she's in, or how much turmoil is in her life, she's always thanking God. I love her dearly. But like I said, it didn't wake me up. I was still blind. And it got even worse. Thankfully, my sister called my dad later on that year and told him, you need to come up here and get him. When my dad came up here, I was living with a group of people in an old abandoned 2-story house behind Garner's Farms off of 70. And I'll never forget it. I felt somebody kick me. I was sleeping in the floor in a sleeping bag. And when I opened up my eyes, my dad was standing over me. And he said, in the car. Folks, I'm telling you, I didn't argue with the man. I knew better. But it was a godsend. He took me back home, put me on the bus and sent me to California, to my brother out there. My brother put me to work in the company he was working for. I worked all summer long. Came back home, went back to school. Graduated, 20 years old, got married. The only good thing, folks, that came out of that marriage was my two boys. That marriage didn't last. Neither one of us was in God. So it didn't last. Ended up in divorce. They were living in Alabama, I was living here. Second marriage. Once again, God was nowhere to be seen in our lives. That too ended in a divorce. That was first part of 90. I went and got my oldest son for the summer. He was 12. That second marriage pretty much did me in. I had started going to church at Tuttle's Grove United Methodist on Highway 70 and was trying to get to know God. But there were some things that happened in the church that I didn't agree with, so I ended up leaving the church, but I stayed in my Bible. And for some reason or other, I always went back to the teachings that my maternal grandmother gave me. Because what few times I went to church as a child, it was with her when I went to spend the night with her, which wasn't very often. Because she was on up into age and she just couldn't be around a small child. But God rest her soul, she was a good woman. But I always went back to the basics that she taught. I went and got my son. The second divorce destroyed me. I was in the middle of a bankruptcy, in the middle of getting divorced, and then my first wife takes me back to court for more child support. So I've got all of this coming down on top of me. Me and my son's packing up, moving from the place I'm fixing to lose in Beaufort to an apartment here in Havelock. I get a phone call from my dad telling me I need to get home. If I want to see my mother alive, I need to get home. So I got my boy. We got to go. When I got to Anniston, got to the hospital, the doctor had already told Mom that there was nothing he could do for her, that she only had 10% of her heart working. And he wanted to keep her in the hospital, and she said, no, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to die in this hospital. I'll die at home in my bed with my children around me. At that time, Mama had already been through a triple bypass in Birmingham. And after that triple bypass, I don't know what happened, but I think it woke her up. Mama had went and got saved. And she was in church. We got to the hospital with me and my sister and my dad. Nobody else had got there. And Daddy, my sister, had went downstairs so she could smoke a cigarette. I was sitting in a chair in the corner, and I was silently praying. And I told the Lord, I said, you know, she's my mom. Regardless of how she lived her life, regardless of what happened, she was my mom and I loved her. And if it was His will to take her, don't make her suffer. Go ahead and take her. Well, as I was silently praying, Mom was laying in bed and she was in and out. I'm sure because of her heart and because of all the medication she was on. But she mumbled something. And I got up and I walked over and I said, what'd you say, Mama? And she looked at me and she said, some man just asked me if I was ready to go, and I told him I wasn't going anywhere. And folks, I don't know how y'all take that. I know how I take it. Well, she made it home. I think this happened on a Monday. She waited. She hung on until my brother finally got there Thursday afternoon. He was the last child to come home. Friday morning, as the sun rose, Mom went to live with the Lord. If I could pick my way to go, if I can choose, if the God grants me that, I'll choose the way she went. As the sun's coming up in His glory, then I'll go to His house. Came back home after we buried her. And I had the opportunity, working at Cherry Point, to go to Meridian, Mississippi, because we had just taken over the field team site there, working on A4s. So I said, okay, this would be a good opportunity for me to go, because I'll be closer to my boys, be closer to Daddy, because I can go over and check on him every weekend. So I took that opportunity and I went. That's where I met my godsend. She was working for the contractors. It took me a long time to even get her to go out with me. Because unfortunately, if you know anything about Cherry Point and the government, people that goes TAD has a bad reputation. I had to prove to her that I wasn't married. She agreed to go out with me. We dated, fell in love, married, and then after 6 years of me being up there, daughter went to school at University of Alabama, and I brought her and her son back here. She had 3 children. After the kids got grown, left home, I'm sitting around, I'm thinking, let me go back, because I think I need to let you folks know that after I went to Meridian, all the stuff that was coming down on me with my divorce, bankruptcy, losing everything I had, but when I left here and went to Meridian, I had $500 between me and starvation. That was it. And then my first wife taking me back to court for more child support. I didn't turn away from God. I ran from Him. Just as hard as I could run. Because I thought, how much more can I take? Meeting Chris and settling down with her was the best thing ever happened to me. Came back home, all the kids grown, they're on their own, starting their own lives. I've always wanted motorcycles. Always wanted a Harley. So I told Chris, I said, I think I can afford one now, so I'm going to go get me one. Went and got the Harley. Before I came to this church, I was riding my bike. Had been associated with 2 motorcycle clubs here in the Havelock area. When you ride with a club, then you associate with other clubs. Wasn't happy with either one of them. Didn't understand it, but there was something going on. It was like a tugging. And I just didn't know what it was. I couldn't understand it. I knew I wasn't happy. But it was like something was tied around my heart, pulling it. And all of a sudden, I had this thought. Called a buddy of mine that I grew up with, that I went to the revival with. When I was a kid, Steve Shears. Hadn't seen him since '96. So in '96, after we moved back up here, went TAD to Atlanta. That's where he lived. I found him, went to see him one night. Hadn't seen him since then. So I go onto Facebook, type his name in, and I start looking for him. I run across a Steve Shears picture of him, and I said, that's him. So I sent him a message. The guy sent me a message back, and he said, you have me confused with my dad. He said, he doesn't have a computer. And I said, well, do you mind giving me his number? I told him who I was, and the whole circumstances. We grew up together. So he gave me his number. I called Steve up. The minute we started talking, he started testifying. Testifying his life to me. Testifying his love for God. Folks, I knew right then why I needed to call. It was God reaching out to me once again, after all those years. He had never given up on me. It didn't matter how many times I gave up on him. He never gave up on me. A couple of days went by. Went to go to bed one night. I was waiting for Chris to come upstairs. And she came upstairs, and she just kind of looked at me funny, because most of the time I'm already in the bed. And I looked at her and I said, got to do something. And she said, what? I said, need to get down on my knees. Folks, I got down on my knees that night beside the bed. That lady was beside me. And between the tears and the choking, I thank God for sending his son to die on the cross for me. And I asked Jesus to come into my life and forgive me my sins and save my soul. I have never since then had the peace and the contentment that I have now.
Amen.
I don't know what God's got in store for me. I do feel like I've been in a furnace for the biggest part of my life. And I think he's tempered me for something. I don't know what. But you know what? It don't matter what it is. Because whatever it is, it's his will, and I'm here to do it.
Amen.
Pastor John, I love him. I love his family. This is a family. I love all of you. If you're not coming on Wednesday night to the Revelation study, folks, you don't know what a blessing you're missing. You need to come. I cannot get enough of this. Anything that I can get my hands on to read that is about his word, I want it. I cannot get enough. You know why I come up here with this morning? He's my rock. He's my strength. And he is the absolute truth.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening to anything else, you're listening to a lie.
Amen.
Pastor John, thank you.
Amen.
Awesome.